Hello everybody. Let me show you today Ortems as a planning and scheduling tool for quality control laboratories. So basically Ortems is dealing with different levels of planning, either in production or in your control laboratories. Let's today focus with your control laboratories at a scheduling point of view and at a detailed planning point of view. So basically Ortem is dealing with your ERP as well as your LIMS or your MES if you are in the production side. Let's have a quick look at the process overview of your QCs dealing with Ortems. So basically everything goes from your central planning where initial dates for batches are sent to production and to Ortems. From this production side, samples are sent to your central receptions and then dispatched either to your control laboratories or for some stability testing and non-conformance testing. So at this control laboratories view, Ortems will follow up your different sample and plan and replan your different tests. Ortems will also validate and replan your batch release in order to be in line with your management and your production side. Ortems is also providing analytics and key performances through indicator directly to your management. Let's now have a look at the prototype presentation for your control laboratories. Within the quality organization, the prototype will be focused on the analytical laboratory, so dealing with the head of the laboratory. We will integrate here two teams, Team A and Team D, and three different sets of equipments: HPLC for chromatography, atomic absorption, AA, and UVs. More precisely, we will focus on 5 different tests. So the lot test, the forecast test, or directly the raw material tests, as well as your excipient test and your stability studies. From operation 1 of your production to the lot release, we have two kind of tests. So we have at the in-process stage, in-process tests in between two different operations, and we have at the release stage, the release test. So after you stocked your product, but before you are releasing it. In this prototype, we will focus on these two kind of tests, and first show you in Ortems in one example, so the lot 583, how we are modeling the in-process test and the released test. Let's swap now into Ortems to show you how we are modeling this test in your control laboratories. Welcome in Ortems. So what we have at the left margin here is the list of the different tests for the lot 583. And in the main screen we have within 3 weeks horizon, so from week 19 to week 21, the list of the different tests. So the two first tests are in-process tests, meaning that they are in between operation in your production. And the 6 remaining tests are batch release tests, so they are just before you are releasing the lot. A quick word about the ergonomy. The green triangle is showing the earliest date that you can have the test in your QC lab, and the red triangle is showing the latest date that you have to release the sample from your QC lab. Let's now have a look at all the different tests that we have in this demo. So we are now deselecting the lot 583 in order to get all the different lots in this demo. Okay. So what we can see in the left margin is we have some tests from forecast, so FOR here. but we also have some other tests from stability, as you can see, so stability tests. We also have some raw material tests, so RM tests. And then we have lot tests, so as we just seen before, two different tests, in-process tests and batch release test. Let's first have a mid and long-term view before going into detail into weeks and to the daily scheduling. So Ortems is first of all at a monthly and yearly view a capacity planning tool that will allow you to anticipate and to invest into your new equipment or your new hiring and your new training for new analysts. It will give you better visibility and allow you to take capacity decision and to know how to react when you have an overload. So we will first in this demo analyze the load versus the capacity, and then we will go into the simulation in order to release some load for the analysts and the equipment. Let's come back to Ortems. So what you can see on this screen is the load and capacity analysis. On the left margin we have the list of the different resources. So the three first one are the equipment. So the first one is chromatography, atomic absorption, and then UV equipment. The two remaining resources are team of analysts. So we have here team A and team D in this demo. In the main screen we are displaying the load versus the capacity within 3 months horizon, so from May 2015 to July. So what we are seeing here is we have a percentage of load versus the capacity. So when we are over 100%, we are over the capacity, meaning that we are overloaded. So we have two red alerts when we are overloaded. The dark red meaning that we are over 105, and when we are in a light red we are just a little bit overloaded from 100 to 105. In this capacity and load analysis we are still in infinite capacity, meaning that we can flag the different weeks when we are overloaded. So for instance, if we focus on team D, we can display at the bottom the different weeks when we are overloaded. So for instance, here we can see that the future weeks in team D are mainly overloaded, so we can maybe think about hiring or training some new analysts. Or we can now go more in depth into the simulation and deciding to see which tests are overloading week 23 for instance. So if I go to the detail of week 23 for team D, I can flag easily the different tests that are overloading this week. So here I can flag two tests of raw materials that are overloading this week 23. We can sort them by different criteria, by due date or by quantity and so on. So let's display these two tests at the very bottom that are creating my overload. And what I can do now is I can directly see that actually the latest date that I can release these two tests are at the end of week 25, meaning that I can move these tests from week 23 to week 24 in order to release some load in week 23. So let's do it now. As you can see dynamically, we can see that we are releasing some load, and now we finished the operation, so we are no more overloaded in week 23. Let's now have a look at week 22 for team D. So as we can see, the load is about 150%, meaning that we are very overloaded for this week. So what we can display now is how many people do I actually need for this week. So we need here more than 7 people. And how many people can I actually have regarding my capacity and my number of analysts for team D. I actually have only 5 people working there. So that's why we are very overloaded. So now what we can simulate is to maybe change the capacity of team D and say that maybe we can now allocate some more people. So we can say that from 5 people working there, I will be hiring 2 more people or training 2 more people, and their availability here will not be 75% but maybe 85% because we can maybe cancel some meeting that they have. And now what we can see is I did free some capacity there because we are no more overloaded. So we can directly see that in the load and capacity percentage, where we can see that we are below 100%. Now, Ortems at a midterm horizon, so in a weekly process, Ortems will give you the detailed visibility of the load, so you will know which decision can you take regarding either your capacity or your advance and delay your test, or what if a production hazard delay all the release test of one lot. We will see afterward that Ortems has also a powerful load leveling engine. What if I have to delay some tests because of the due date and the overload? Let's have a look at Team D for week 21 and filter the tests that are overloading week 21 for Team D. So what we can see there is we have 2 raw material tests that are overloading the week 21. We cannot move that to week 22 because we have an overload here. And we cannot move that to week 23 because we are near 100%. So we have to move that to week 24. But our latest date that we can release the test is actually the end of week 23. So we will be then late for this to test. So we can do that now. Select the 2 tests and move them forward from 3 weeks in the future, and see directly that the color has changed and now is yellow to show you that we are a little bit late comparing the latest date that we can move them. We can continue to move them in the future and say that we are moving them by 1 day, let's say. And we can see that now the color has changed to orange, showing that we are a little bit more late comparing to the latest date that we have to release the test. Let's now talk about hazards. So what if my equipment of chromatography is down for the week 23? So what if we have a preventive maintenance for one of these equipments? So in the week 23, as we can see, we have a load of 93%. So what will happen if I don't have any more 2 HPLC machines but 1 remaining, and the 1 remaining maybe will have an efficiency of 100%? So what will happen here is dynamically Ortems will flag a bottleneck here, and we can at the same way flag the different tests that are overloading, and we can see that most of them are raw material tests. So if we filter this test, we can see directly where they are loading the period. In Ortems, there are 2 ways to solve your load versus your capacity issues. First of all, you can, as we did before, manually interact with the planning by moving your test from 1 week to the other one, or you can move your test from one resource to the other one to solve your load levels. You can also use the automatic load leveling engine in Ortems. So let me show you quickly the settings of the load leveling. So we can set for the load leveling engine to forbid any delays. So when the load leveling engine will start, we won't produce any delay. So let's run it now, So as we can see, from week 19 to week 24, we didn't generated any overload, so we are in a finite capacity. But for week 24 to week 27, we did generated some overload because we didn't want it to generate any delays for the different tests. So if we go to week 24 here and sort the different tests, so the raw material tests here that are generated the overload, we can see that actually there are no way to move these tests to week 25 without generating any delays regarding the due date of the releasing test date. So that's why Ortems has generated here an overload. So we can now clear this constraint by saying I want to be in a full finite capacity, so the load leveling will load level all the different weeks, so we won't have any red color of overload here. So that's why we are here in a finite capacity. But Ortems has generated some delays. So in line with your business strategy, Ortems will prioritize your key test to be load level without producing any delay. And for the remaining one that are not a business priority for you, Ortems would generate some delays. So for instance, if we look at the list of the delayed tests here, we are producing delays mainly for the forecast test. So it's not a strategic test here. And we did generate some delays for the raw material test, but as we can see, we are not in a big priority, so it's not a priority number one. Let's have a look now in Ortems how we are modeling the short-term scheduling view. So as we can see in the left margin, we have now more detail about the equipment and the team of analysts. For instance, for the atomic absorption, we can see that we have two different equipments. For chromatography, we have three equipments. For team A, we are still at the aggregated level, but for team D, we can see the 5 different analysts that will be working. We are looking at 2 weeks horizon, so from Thursday week 15 to Saturday week 16. Also, in the background, we can see shaded areas that are representing the hours and the time scale when the analysts are not working. So we can see for each resource the sequence of the different operations, and we can highlight the different step of the testing operations. So for instance, here we are highlighting that Garvin will be working first on the atomic absorption equipment, and then on the second equipment of atomic absorption, Kelly will be working on it. It is important to understand that in Ortems, all the different steps of the operation is synchronized in one loop, meaning that if I push forward the first step of the operation testing, I will be pushing forward all the different operation forward. So now that we have pushed forward the different operation of this test, we can try to move the operation from one resource to the other one. So for instance, we can take this operation from Garvin and trying to find which analysts are skilled for this operation. So we can see that the highlighted analysts are represented here, and the ones that are shaded are not skilled for this operation. So for instance, if I try to move this operation to Jones, Ortems will advise me that I cannot move this operation. So I can directly maybe make the choice to move it to Boer. I can do it manually, or I can use the automatic scheduler engine and run it, and in one loop I'm going to reschedule my planning. A quick word about the ergonomy. So what we can see is the tag representing the actual operation has a color, and the color is representing here the item color. So what we can see is Ortems has grouped with each others the different tests by item to improve and to optimize the setup times in the machines. We can also have a look at the setup times at the detail by looking at the small rectangle next to the operation. So directly there I can see that the setup time here in this chromatographic equipment is 2 hours. Let's now introduce hazards in your QC labs. So what can happen in your machines and equipment? Production hazards can arrive, and maybe you will have a breakdown, and maybe you will have a hazard for your analyst, and maybe one analyst will be ill until the end of the week, for instance. So let's simulate that in Ortems. So first of all, let's say that maybe the HPLC equipment is down until the end of the week. So maybe we have a breakdown, and let's say that for the analyst Bauer here on team D, let's say that Bauer is maybe ill until the end of the week as well. Okay, so what we can see first of all is we didn't introduce the breakdown and the illness, and all the operation were pushed forward on the same resource. So what we can do now is directly manually take the operation from one resource to the other one, or we can maybe rerun the scheduler that will automatically resequence the different operation on the different resources.